Hello and welcome to my review of Wolfenstein 3D. The version I'm reviewing is the downloaded version that I got off Xbox Live Arcade Marketplace. Wolfenstein 3D is generally regarded as being the father of first-person shooters. Indeed, this game originally came out in 1992 and was released on MS-DOS. And it seemed that everything followed after it. Certainly really good first-person shooters. I don't know if there were any that predated this. But certainly that seems to be the widely regarded opinion, that this was the grandfather of the first-person shooter genre. The game is set in Nazi Germany, I think, in the Second World War, where you are an American Special Forces soldier, and your job is to go into various Nazi strongholds and work your way through the maze-like corridors, killing Nazi soldiers, and eventually facing off against the various bosses that the game throws at you along the way. It's a very simple concept, but it's very effective. It's easy to see where, its next game, Doom, where it got all of its ideas from. This is almost like a blueprint for Doom, as it were. But it's a very, very good game in its own right. It's a really tough game. Even on the easiest difficulty settings, it can provide a challenge for you. Essentially, you don't have the luxury of taking that many hits. And so quite often you find yourself in a situation whereby you're running around with very little energy left and trying to find some health pickups. This heralds back to the day of games where you just couldn't hide behind some cover and miraculously gain full health. You actually had to go out and find health pickups, be it food like you see there, or sometimes there'd be some medical supplies lying about. And that always added to a more challenging gameplay. I'm not a big fan of hiding behind cover for a few seconds and then your health magically restoring itself. I always think it takes away from the gameplay. It reduces the difficulty of the game. You can just keep popping in and out of cover and shooting somebody, and I much prefer it whereby you have a health meter that gradually reduces as you get shot, and you have to actually go out there. The game then forces you to go out there and explore and find health. And Wolfenstein 3D is one of those games. Now, what's interesting to note is in some of the early builds of Doom, there were a lot more nods towards Wolfenstein. For example, in this game you pick up treasure and you have a score, and that was something that was in the very early builds of Doom, but they were eventually dropped. For whatever reasons, I don't know, but they eventually dropped that. But going back to Wolfenstein 3D, I really do like this game. It's old. If you're going to play it now, be prepared. Every single level is flat, for want of a better phrase. There's no stairs or anything like that to go up and down. It's your fairly basic first-person shooter, but then you have to remember that this game is nearly 20 years old now, and this is where pretty much it all started. Whereas Doom gets a lot of the plaudits simply because it was a vastly superior game to this. It was like night and day. Doom was had a lot more complexity to it. The level design was a lot better by virtue of having different levels. By that I mean that, having staircases enabled you to have a vertical game rather than this, which is just a more horizontal game. I don't know whether I'm explaining that easy or not. Go and play this and then go and play Doom, and then you'll see what I mean. That Doom is a more vertical game. It's not just based on a flat level like this is. Also in this, there are a lot of secrets as well. There are many secret rooms, and it is quite important that you do check them out, because there are some pretty decent weapons. There's not that many weapons to choose from in the game. I think there's 3 or 4, if you include your basic knife, which is pretty useless, to be honest. You have the pistol, which you start out with, then you have this submachine gun, and then you have what can only be described as a big Gatling gun. And quite often you'll find these in hidden rooms, so it is worth thoroughly exploring the levels. The levels themselves can be quite big, and they can also be quite confusing. This is probably the big drawback that I have with this game, is that some of the levels are quite confusing because of the fact that there's a limited graphical variance between each location. They all tend to look pretty much the same. So in the more larger levels, and more complex levels, it can be very easy to get lost, and you know, you can sometimes be wandering around for ages, and there'll be just one room that you haven't explored. You can end up going past it a few times because you think you've already been in there, and that to me is the main drawback of Wolfenstein 3D, is that each location is very, very samey. There's a slight variance in each level as you progress through the game. Like Doom, there are different chapters you know, to play through, and at the end of each chapter you face off against a boss, so you have a big boss battle, and there is a slight graphical difference between them. In many respects I feel almost guilty of calling the game graphically, because of the fact that it's so old, and because of the fact that it was trailblazing. I mean, when you go to Doom, yeah, a lot of the graphics can look the same in Doom, but it's very hard to get lost in Doom. Well, I found it very hard to get lost because there's a lot more variety. In Wolfenstein 3D, there just isn't, and it can get, as I say, it can get really, really frustrating. As I say, there are some differences. You can see here, you know, the look and feel of the look certainly of this level initially seems to be different, but once you start progressing through these levels, the look can pretty much end up being the same as what you've already seen. What's interesting about this is the boss battles. I mean, there's a giant Robo Hitler at the end of one of the boss battles, and that alone, you know, fighting off against a big Robo Hitler has got to be worth downloading this game for alone. I mean, how many games out there do you get to fight against a big Robo Hitler? And there's nothing more satisfying as plugging in with a Gatling gun. And there's various other bosses as well. That one sticks out in my mind. I'm not too sure what the names of the other bosses are. I just know the Robo Hitler. I think there's some chemical weapons person or somebody like that in it. I mean, I'm not even too sure of the story of this game, because there was never any. There's no cutscenes. There's nothing like that. I mean, this is back in the day when games were, you know, you just put the thing in and you played it. You know, you didn't have to wade through hours and hours and hours of full motion video or whatever. You know, very expensive to produce cutscenes. There's none of that. And I often think with modern games, if they cut down on that, they'd cut down on the actual time it takes to A, develop the game, and B, the cost. Because it must be prohibitively expensive hiring all these Hollywood voice actors and so on and so forth, and then taking all the time to do all these, you know, dramatic cutscenes and so on. And in the end, I mean, I couldn't care less. I just want to play the game. I'm not interested in a very complicated story. Give me a brief loading screen that tells me what's happened and what's going to come next. That's just as good for me. I don't need all of the dramatic claptrap that goes on. I just want to play. And, you know, this is what I love about going back and playing games like Wolfenstein. You're not, you know, bogged down waiting for some overblown cutscene to play through. You know, in the worst cases is you can't skip it because they don't want you to skip it. They want you to see the cutscenes. They want you to say, you know, look at the Hollywood production value, and it's like, I just want to play. And that's the beauty of a lot of the old games over a lot of the new ones, is the fact that you can just get on and play. And I find them more satisfying that way. But yeah, I mean, there's not really a lot else to say, to be honest, about Wolfenstein 3D. It is what it is, and it's a classic game, and it's probably a bit presumptuous to say that without this, the first-person genre wouldn't be what it is today, because there'll have always been somebody else that would have come along with the, you know, with games, with first-person shooter games. But you know, the accolade has to go with those, with the people that did, and id Software, you know, back in 1992 were, you know, according to the press, the first. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's Wolfenstein 3D. Thanks for watching. I hope I didn't bore you too much to death with my little retro section here, and stay tuned for more video reviews coming on the channel in the near future. Thanks for watching.